Hi, I'm Noelle. This morning, my sister stepped out of a white SUV, tossed her coffee, and it landed all over me. She didn't apologize. She didn't even recognize me. She walked into my hotel like she owned the place. But then, her fiance looked me dead in the eye and called me boss. They say family's supposed to know you best. But what happens when they pretend you don't exist until they need something? What if the sister who used to mock your dreams now works under your name and still doesn't say thank you? Is it really revenge if I never said a word? Or is silence just louder when you've built the room they're standing in? The rain had barely stopped, but the sky still looked like it hadn't made up its mind. I stepped out of my car quietly, closing the door with just enough force to remind myself I was still here. Alive. Standing in front of the hotel that bore my mother's name, but not my own. My heels clicked against the slick pavement. A valet dashed by me with an umbrella, offering it to a couple climbing out of a Tesla. He didn't even glance at me. I didn't expect him to. That was part of the deal. When you decide not to put your face on the plaque or your name on the press releases, people forget you own the floor they're standing on. I paused by the staff entrance. Through the tinted glass, I could see the morning crew buzzing, resetting the breakfast area, fluffing throw pillows like it was some kind of ritual. No one looked up. I didn't take it personally. I hadn't worn a name tag in 3 years. I didn't need one. My authority wasn't in print. It was in the decisions no one noticed until something broke. I reached for the handle, then stopped. A low hum rose from the street. A white SUV rounded the corner fast. Tires hissed against leftover puddles. The driver didn't slow down. I took half a step back, instinctual. Too late. Coffee. No. Mud. A splash of both. The cup must have been resting in the side holder, tilted just enough. It flew through the window as it rolled down, flung in a careless arc. And it hit me. Coat. Pants. Bag. Delara. She stepped out of the SUV like it was a stage. Hair curled to perfection, blazer cinched tight at the waist, heels sharp enough to slice through someone's pride. She didn't see me, not really. She looked at me, sure, but not in a way that made her stop. Not in a way that said, "You're familiar." "Watch where you stand," she muttered, brushing past like I was blocking her spotlight. She didn't stop walking, didn't say sorry, didn't even glance at the mud dripping down my sleeves. I stood there, soaked. Coat sticking to my arms, purse ruined. A valet whistled under his breath as he passed me. I could have said something. I didn't. I didn't cry either. Instead, I walked in behind her. The hotel lobby glowed like it always did at this hour. Gold-tinted sconces, fresh orchids, music low and safe. She was already striding past the front desk, giving the concierge a nod like she owned the place. He smiled at her like she was royalty. Then his eyes flicked to me and darted away. She turned just as we passed each other. "Excuse me," she said flatly, brushing my shoulder. That's when it hit me harder than the coffee ever could. She didn't know. Delara Kincaid didn't recognize her own sister. I stepped back. Let her pass. Let her own that space the way she always had. Let her walk deeper into the hotel, my hotel, with the same ease she walked all over people's boundaries. She made it to the elevator before Thatcher caught up to her. I hadn't seen him since their engagement was announced on every platform known to man. Smiling with his arm draped around her waist, like he had no idea who she used to be. But when he saw me, his steps faltered. His smile shifted, tightened. He nodded. "Good morning, Ms. Hoyt," he said gently. "Will you be joining us upstairs, boss?" He said it cleanly, loud enough. Delara stopped cold. She turned. "Wait. Boss?" Our eyes locked. And still, no recognition. But this time, I saw something else in her face. Not confusion. Fear. She blinked just once, but it was enough. That kind of blinking. The kind that happens when someone's brain needs to rearrange itself around a truth they didn't see coming. I didn't wait for her to speak. I stepped away from the elevator bank, nodded politely at Thatcher, and made my way toward the back corridor where the executive suite access sat locked behind a keypad No one else on the floor could open without my code. It wasn't until I reached the security lounge in the basement, where the smell of hot coffee mixed with bleach and silence, that I let myself breathe again. Marcus looked up from the monitor wall. He tapped a pen against his notepad, eyes still scanning the feeds. "She give you trouble?" "No," I said, slipping off my blazer. "She gave me clarity." He turned his chair halfway toward me. "You want me to tag her entry logs for the next few days?" I shook my head. Let her feel comfortable. Let her think she still belongs. He studied me for a second, like he wanted to say more, but thought better of it. That's what I liked about Marcus. He knew when silence held more weight than support. Upstairs, I could see her through the camera. Delara, sitting in the atrium, champagne in hand, legs crossed like the whole place was her living room. Two PR girls flanked her. One handed her a small white box, probably a media gift. The other leaned in, whispering something with a little too much laughter. Delara threw her head back, showy, calculated, empty. She still didn't know, and everyone around her still believed she ran the room. I left the lounge and headed back toward the front hall. On my way up, I paused at the mirror by the west stairwell. The mud was gone. I'd scrubbed it off, changed coats, but the look on her face still clung to me. Fear. She recognized the shift, even if not the source. I passed the concierge desk again. A couple was checking in, a woman with a leopard print umbrella and her husband, who asked for a room with a mountain view. Behind them, Delara was in conversation with the lobby manager, complimenting the floral arrangements like she'd picked them herself. I kept walking. She didn't notice me this time. That's when the absurdity hit me. She had just walked into a building I bought, stood on carpet I selected, sipped from glasses I approved, and never paused to wonder how it all came to be. And the SUV she climbed out of? I knew that car. Not just the model or the make. The actual vehicle. 3 years ago, I was still doing weekend cleaning jobs. That car had come in with mud-caked rims, and the woman behind the wheel, Delara, had dropped the keys without looking up. "I'm late for brunch. Don't scratch it." Those were her words. I'd spent nearly an hour detailing the inside, removing makeup stains from the visor, brushing breadcrumbs from the leather seats, polishing perfume smears off the gearshift. She didn't tip, didn't even say thank you. I remember her posting a photo later that same day, sitting cross-legged on some patio, captioned, "Hustle is in my blood." The memory made me want to laugh and ache at the same time. Back in my office, I opened the drawer on the right side of the desk and pulled out the file labeled Maribel Hoyt Trust. Inside was the deed. The original one, signed, notarized, sealed. It didn't bear my first name. I hadn't wanted it to. Putting Noelle Kincaid on the paperwork would have created noise. Questions, headlines, people who would try to twist it into some kind of redemption arc. I didn't want redemption. I wanted the work to speak louder than the past. So I used hers. My mother's. Maribel. She never had luxury, never had the chance to sit in a lobby like this one. But she'd taught me what hospitality meant. Clean floors, warm greetings, staying late even when no one said thank you. This place was hers more than it was ever mine. I'd named the holding company after her. I'd built the structure around her values, and I'd buried my ego under every square foot of tile. Not because I was hiding, but because I wanted to build something I didn't need applause for. There was a knock on the glass. Marcus again. He held up a tablet. "You'll want to see this." On screen, Delara. She was upstairs now, giving a tour to 2 women from a startup magazine, smiling like she'd been invited, talking like she'd booked the space. I leaned back in my chair. Let her enjoy it. Let her soak in a moment she thought she owned. But I knew something she didn't. People always remember who walks into a room loud, but they never forget who walks out holding the keys. I stayed in my office for a while after Marcus left, just staring at the screens. Delara floated through the building like she belonged to it. Her movements were smooth, curated. She knew exactly which side to tilt her head for the camera, exactly how to hold her flute of champagne to look casual but expensive. It should have bothered me more. Maybe a few years ago it would have. But now, I just felt removed, detached in the way you get when someone says your name wrong one too many times and you stop correcting them. I needed to move. Sitting still made it worse. I grabbed the key ring from my drawer and headed out through the side exit, avoiding the lobby altogether. There's a narrow marble staircase at the far end of the west wing. No signage, no carpet, no elevator access. Guests never use it. It leads to a storage landing now converted into a plant room for the rooftop garden. I climbed it slowly. Each step echoed in that hollow way old buildings hum when they think you're alone. My fingers trailed the railing. I'd had it restored last year, kept the original wood instead of switching to stainless steel. I liked the imperfections, the scratch marks, the shallow grooves where hands used to grip it in different eras. That railing had witnessed more truths than any security feed ever could. That staircase used to go nowhere. It was a leftover from the hotel's original layout, a forgotten shaft between two floors. When I took over, I had the wall knocked out and gave it a purpose. Quiet. Hidden. Necessary. That was the first thing I ever redesigned here, and I never told anyone. I stopped on the top step and closed my eyes. The air smelled faintly of lavender. Ms. Nadine, our overnight manager, must have set the diffusers again. But scent wasn't what stirred the memory. It was the sound, laughter, faint, tinny, echoing down the hallway from someone watching a video on their phone. And just like that, I was 17 again. Sitting under the maple tree in our backyard, sketchpad on my knees, drawing floor plans like they were blueprints to a life that hadn't rejected me yet. We were having a barbecue. Delara was showing off her new haircut. Dad had bought matching steaks for the men and burnt veggie burgers for everyone else. I was sketching the front desk of an imaginary hotel. Delara leaned over my shoulder and laughed, not just at the drawing, but loud enough to pull attention from everyone near the grill. "A hotel? With what money, Nolly? Please, you'll be folding napkins at someone else's check-in desk." A few people chuckled. Not cruelly, just socially. You know the kind. People who laugh because it's easier than being the only one who doesn't. I didn't say anything. I didn't cry. But I remember folding that sketch into 4 perfect squares that night and shoving it into the fireplace before anyone saw it again. I still remember the sound it made as it burned, like it was glad to be gone. And that wasn't even the worst of it. There was the Christmas photo. I was maybe 12, Delara 15. Mom had everyone dressed in matching red. White fireplace behind us, snow falling just right. Except I wasn't in the photo. I'd gone outside for 2 minutes to grab my boots from the back porch. When I came back, the picture had already been taken. "You had mud on your pants," Mom said. "We couldn't wait forever." Delara had been the one to shut the door behind me. That photo still sits in a silver frame on our parents' bookshelf. No one notices who's missing. They just say, "What a perfect moment." And then there were the letters. I didn't even know they existed until a year after high school. Ms. Ramos, my guidance counselor, ran into me at a gas station just outside of Tacoma. I was working 2 jobs, still trying to figure out how to afford a single community college class. She looked genuinely confused. "I never heard back from you," she said. "You got into 2 programs. We mailed the packets." I blinked. "What packets?" She described them. Envelopes with school seals, brochures, financial aid info. She even remembered I'd qualified for partial grants. The mail that week had been Delara's job. I'd had finals. I was barely sleeping. She'd picked everything up and tossed what she didn't want to carry. "I figured it was junk from schools you couldn't afford anyway," she said a month later, like it meant nothing. She admitted it, casually, with a shrug. No apology, no guilt, just, "What was I supposed to do? You didn't even know they came." She was right. I didn't. That memory had been buried under a dozen others like it, but it surfaced now with the clarity only silence can bring. Not the scream kind. the type that settles into your bones and changes the way you stand. Back in my office, I opened a drawer and pulled out a shoebox I kept hidden under files. Inside was a faded photo, not the Christmas one, not the barbecue. This one was taken at my cousin's wedding. Someone else had snapped it by accident. I was standing at the edge of the group, slightly turned away from the camera. Delara was front and center. The rest of the family formed a semicircle around her like she was the sun. I was there, just barely. My smile was small, measured, not fake, not full. I held the photo for a long time. I wasn't invisible. I just learned how to stand where no one looked. I tucked the photo back into the shoebox and slid it beneath the stack of old financial records. The kind of records no one ever asks to see unless they're trying to figure out where something went wrong. I pressed the drawer shut with the side of my hand and stood up slowly, my knees aching a little more than I cared to admit. Outside the office, the hallway was quiet. Not silent, just that kind of muffled quiet that comes when people are trying not to be obvious about what they're whispering, the kind that pretends not to know. I made my way toward the staff stairwell, thinking I'd take the back way up to the rooftop for air. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. The name flashing across the screen wasn't a surprise. Aunt Rebecca. Her message came in quick taps. "Noelle, please don't make this into a thing." I didn't reply. Then a second message. "She didn't mean it. Don't ruin her moment." I stared at it for a few seconds, thumb hovering, then let the screen go dark. I turned the phone over in my hand and placed it face down on the windowsill beside the stairwell door. It felt better out of reach. It wasn't the first time someone asked me to stay quiet so someone else could shine. I continued up the stairs. Halfway through, another message arrived. This one from Cousin Graham, who I hadn't heard from since Mom's funeral. "Family First Group is planning something special for Delara's engagement. You'll be proud of what we've put together." I blinked. Family First? I hadn't heard of any group chat. Moments later, a notification popped up from my assistant, Lacey. It was a forwarded screenshot, a thread, a group chat. Family First. All my relatives, all the people I'd once held my breath around at reunions, talking about Delara's engagement, gushing about the venue, the florals, the cocktails, the perfect rooftop for a sunset proposal pic. My hotel. Every line of that thread burned slow. Noelle doesn't even like being on camera. We should keep it Delara only for press shots. Can we ask her to enter from the side so she's not in background frames? I closed the file and sat down on the bottom stair. Not in background frames. I had to read that twice to believe it. Then I laughed, short, not loud enough to echo. I took a screenshot of the whole thing and texted it back to Lacey. "Cancel their reservation. Use the usual phrasing. I don't care what excuse." I didn't explain. She wouldn't need one. Upstairs, I could hear the soft murmur of guests settling into early dinner reservations. Someone's heels clicked across the upper landing. I didn't look up. I didn't need to know who it was. I'd already learned the pattern of footsteps that moved like they were born to be seen. Delara's digital fingerprint was everywhere. Her Instagram pinged a new post a few minutes later. "Couldn't do this without my family. Grateful to the ones who've stood by me from day one." Photo, her fiance, our parents, champagne glasses raised, sunset behind them. I pinched the image to zoom in. No tags, no captioned names, no trace of me. But that wasn't the part that stunned me. It was the background, my hotel lobby, down to the gold-rimmed vases I'd had custom designed from a local Seattle artisan. And there was Lacey, out of focus, mid-step, walking behind the front desk. I wasn't in the picture, but the details were all mine. Every inch she used to shape her image had my fingerprints embedded in the seams, and she never once acknowledged it. It didn't even hurt anymore. It just confirmed what I'd been too polite to say aloud for years. Delara didn't forget to include me. She deliberately edited me out. I stood up, tucked my phone into my coat, and walked back toward the hallway. That kind of exclusion isn't an accident. It's a tactic. It's what people use when they want to erase you without looking like they're trying. I passed the banquet team reviewing the week's setup schedule and nodded to them on my way through. They nodded back like nothing was out of place, like my last name wasn't being scrolled through hundreds of devices while simultaneously scrubbed off the guest list. Just before I reached the elevator, I deleted the thread. Every message, every screenshot. Then, I opened Delara's profile, hovered over the following tab, and tapped unfollow. I wasn't angry. I was done. As the elevator doors slid open, I looked up, and there he was. Thatcher. He didn't look shocked to see me. He didn't look awkward either. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes steady. He looked at me, not like a man confused, but like someone who had finally put two and two together. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there in the elevator, like he'd been waiting for me, not impatiently, but with a kind of quiet certainty I didn't expect. I stepped in beside him without speaking. The doors closed, floor 10 lit up. He finally said, "You changed your hair." "People do that," I said. He nodded, eyes ahead. "I figured it out last night," he added, almost under his breath. "Your last name. The way you move through the building, no one looks at you like they're waiting for you to leave." That was true. I'd built it that way. He turned his head slightly toward me. "You're the one who trained me. You corrected every draft I sent for 3 months straight. You once made me rewrite a welcome card 3 times because I put 'enjoy your stay' in lowercase." I remembered that. I also remembered him thanking me after shift, every single night. "You handed me my first real paycheck," he said. "You signed it, Maribel Hoyt." We reached the rooftop. The air hit us immediately, cool, damp, thick with salt from Puget Sound. The kind of morning that felt like a breath held too long. He walked to the railing, hands tucked in the pockets of his blazer. I stayed by the door. "I asked Delara last week if she had siblings," he said without looking at me. "She said no." That didn't surprise me. What surprised me was how steady his voice was when he said it. "She lied," I said flatly. "She did," he nodded. "But you didn't correct her. You didn't say a word." "I've learned that saying less keeps things cleaner." He turned back toward me then. "But why let her humiliate you like that? In front of people? On your own sidewalk?" "She's been doing it since we were kids," I said. "This time, at least, I had dry shoes and a deed in my desk." He smiled, only slightly. Not mockingly. Just enough to say he understood more than he let on. We stayed there for another minute before he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "A friend of mine, Julia, was at a brunch a few weeks ago," he said. "Delara didn't realize they knew each other." He opened a file, pressed play. Delara's voice poured out, recorded over the clink of silverware and shallow background laughter. "Noelle, that girl's probably mopping hotel bathrooms somewhere. She never had any presence. She fades. Always has." My jaw tightened, not because of the words, but because of how easily they came out of her mouth. Thatcher paused the audio. "I figured you should hear it from her." I didn't answer. He tucked the phone away again, not needing to make a show of it. "She acts like you're a ghost," he said. "She prefers the version of me that doesn't speak," I replied. "Maybe," he said, "but ghosts don't leave footprints." I didn't expect that. The sun was beginning to burn off the fog. I nodded once toward the elevator. "Come with me." We rode down in silence. I led him past the main lobby, through a set of private doors most guests don't even know exist. At the end of the corridor was my office. Discreet, functional, nothing extravagant. I opened the drawer to the left of my chair and pulled out the documents. I laid them flat on the desk. "Transfer of ownership," I said. "Full trust inherited under my mother's name. Hotel registered under the Maribel Hoyt Holding Company." He read it quietly. Didn't rush. When he looked up, I added, "Delara always assumed she'd get everything just by showing up, but no one ever told her she had to earn it." He ran his finger along the edge of the paper. "She doesn't even know this exists, does she?" She wouldn't recognize it if it were framed in front of her. He leaned back, arms folded now. And you've just let her walk around here, taking up space? She's taken space her whole life. I just stopped stepping aside for it. There was a pause. A long one. The kind that says more than whatever's coming next. Then I said it. You're marrying someone who lied to you about having a sister. What else do you think she's not saying? He didn't flinch, but I saw it. That flicker in his eyes. Not because I accused her, but because he knew I hadn't lied. The pause between us didn't last long. He gave a subtle nod, as if to say, "You don't have to explain anything else," and stepped aside. I walked past Thatcher without a word, without a glance, and took the long hallway back toward the executive wing. I knew what was waiting before I reached the double doors. Delara. She stood near the concierge desk like someone forced to wait in a line she thought she'd skip. Her arms were folded tight, her mouth pressed thin. A few hotel guests glanced her way, sensing tension even if they didn't know its name. The moment our eyes met, she pushed off the wall. "You work here?" Her voice wasn't curious. It was coated in that familiar cocktail of disbelief and disdain. Before I could answer, Thatcher stepped in from behind her. "She doesn't work here," he said calmly. "She owns this building." Silence cracked across the marble like a dropped glass. The concierge froze mid-swipe of a room card. One of the bellhops looked up from his cart. Even the piano music from the lobby system seemed to stumble over its own notes. Delara's head turned slowly toward me, searching for something in my face she had clearly never bothered to look for. I didn't give her a smile. I didn't offer a hand. I just waited. "I need to talk to you," she muttered, eyes darting at the small crowd that had gathered at a distance. I didn't respond. I simply pivoted and began walking. She followed. We moved through the hallway, past framed photographs of the hotel's restoration, down the quiet corridor that led to the executive offices. Her heels clicked behind me like she was trying to catch up to her own story. When we reached the end of the hall, I pushed open the door to my office and stepped inside. She followed, breath uneven. "Why didn't you tell me?" she said before I'd even closed the door. I turned slowly to face her. "Because you never asked." "You made me look like a damn fool," she snapped, arms flailing slightly now. "No," I said evenly. "You did that by talking before you understood who you were talking to." She blinked, furious. "You're just going to stand there and act like you didn't set me up?" "You set yourself up, Delara. I didn't hide behind sunglasses. I didn't throw coffee. I didn't lie to my fiance about having a sister." That landed. I watched it hit her like a quiet thud against glass. No crash, just the dull realization that the reflection she'd built was cracking. She sat down without asking, gripping the armrest like it would keep her balanced. "I was embarrassed," she finally said. "You always made me feel small." I leaned forward slightly. "No, I just never played along when you tried to act bigger than you were." She looked up at me, wounded. "You really won't forgive me?" I took a deep breath and let the words sit before I said them. Forgiveness is not a discount code I hand out to people who call me invisible and then want to skip the checkout line. You haven't earned it, and I'm not interested in pretending you have. She stood, pacing now. "So what, you just want me to grovel?" "I don't want anything from you," I said, "but I also won't let you rewrite the story just because the ending isn't flattering." Delara stopped at the edge of my desk. "Then why let me in at all?" I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a small envelope. "Because I don't want to become like you." She frowned. I handed her the envelope. "This is a contact, someone in Chicago who works with public figures to rebrand after mistakes. They're discreet, they're good. You'll need them." Her hands trembled slightly as she took it. As she looked down at the envelope, I reached into the top drawer and pulled out a letter. Handwritten, faded, the ink barely visible in places. Mom's handwriting. I slid it across the desk. "You may want to read this too." She picked it up, carefully unfolding the lined paper like it might fall apart in her hands. It read, "If they ever force you to choose, I hope they choose you, Noelle. Because I did. Always did. Even when I didn't say it out loud." Delara didn't speak for a long time. When she finally looked up, there was no anger, no spin, no mask. Just someone who hadn't realized until too late that the stage she thought she was standing on had been built by someone else. Behind her, at the door, stood Ms. Abrams, her best friend, the one who'd been at every party, every campaign, every curated shoot. She didn't say a word, but she met my eyes, and in a voice softer than I'd ever heard from her, she said, "I wish I'd known." Delara started to speak. I raised my hand gently. "You don't need to say anything else." She hesitated, then left, and I didn't watch her go. After Delara left my office, I stayed for a few minutes, letting the room settle. The letter from my mother still lay open on the desk, and the silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was whole. I turned off the overhead light, closed the door gently behind me, and walked toward the service hallway. On my way down to the control room, I passed a housekeeper prepping for the evening shift. She offered me a nod, no words. That small gesture meant more than a dozen press quotes ever could. Marcus was already seated at the desk when I entered the security lounge, eyes locked on the main screen. His hand hovered over the pause button. "You're gonna want to see this," he said, not taking his eyes off the monitor. I stepped behind him just as he hit play. It was footage from 2 days ago, pulled from the front entrance feed. Delara, exiting her white SUV, sunglasses on, spilling coffee, onto me. The camera angle caught the whole thing, her wave to the cameras, the dismissive flick of her wrist, and my reaction. Or lack of one. It was already making the rounds online. 42,000 views and climbing. I didn't have to read the comments to guess their tone. One of the headlines flashing in the corner read, "Influencer or Insulter, Seattle's darling caught in hotel scandal." Another, "The hotel owner she didn't recognize." I didn't speak. Neither did Marcus. He just muted the video and turned to me. "This doesn't look like it's slowing down." I nodded once. "Let it run." A few hours later, I found myself standing behind a divider in the main event space, where Delara had insisted on holding her engagement press briefing. Originally, she'd planned to announce a joint project, something involving Thatcher and a handful of investors she'd carefully curated. I wasn't invited to speak. I wasn't even supposed to be there. But I watched. Thatcher stood to the left of the podium, hands folded, jaw tense. Delara stepped forward in a tailored cream pantsuit, hair done, makeup camera ready. But she looked wrong. Not tired, not messy, just off. The kind of off you can't fix with filters. A reporter near the front raised a hand. "Ms. Kincaid, before we begin, do you care to comment on the video circulating online this morning?" Delara froze. Another voice followed immediately. "Is it true you mistook your own sister for hotel staff and publicly humiliated her?" The air thinned. She blinked rapidly. I didn't know she—" Thatcher cleared his throat. She turned toward him, eyes pleading, but he stepped up to the microphone. "I'd like to say something," he began, voice steady, measured. He didn't look at her. "There are principles I live by, things I was taught as a kid, not in school or by PR teams, but at dinner tables and in the quiet of watching how people treat each other." He paused. "One of those is this. Character shows up when no one's watching, but it also shows up when everyone is." He finally looked at her. "And there are people I've come to admire, not for what they post, but for what they protect, even in silence." Then he turned back to the crowd. "We won't be moving forward with the engagement or the partnership. I wish her well." And he walked off the stage. The silence that followed was stunning. No gasp, no camera clicks, just the dull buzz of a system failing to load. I left before Delara could look for me. Back in my office, I checked my inbox. There were 5 emails from brand sponsors suspending contracts with her, 3 from companies cutting ties, 1 from her condo board initiating foreclosure proceedings. The fall didn't come like thunder. It came like soft, repeated taps against glass. Quiet, relentless, final. Lacey knocked once, then entered with her tablet. They're tagging you in clips now. Some media outlets are calling you the sister that built the stage. Want me to flag them? I shook my head. No, let them run it. Even the one she just posted, she tagged you in a photo. My eyes narrowed. She tagged me? Lacey nodded. I picked up my phone. The notification was there, glowing. Delara Kincaid tagged you in a post. I stared at it. Didn't open it. Didn't need to. And then I deleted it. I left the office early the next morning, before most of the staff arrived. The sun hadn't cleared the skyline yet, and the city sat in a kind of hushed gray. On my way through the garden terrace, I noticed the gate had been unlatched. That wasn't normal. Maintenance always kept it secure overnight. She was sitting on the stone bench beneath the arbor, legs pulled up close to her body, like a child who didn't know how else to shrink. No makeup, no shoes. She wasn't crying, she was just still. I stopped a few steps away. I don't have anywhere else to go, Delara said without looking at me. I didn't rush to respond, didn't soften. I just stood there, letting her words hang. There's a cot in the wellness suite, I finally said. You can use it for 2 nights. She nodded once, eyes fixed on the damp brick at her feet. We didn't talk on the way back inside. I walked ahead, not out of cruelty, but because I wasn't sure if I could stand next to her without saying something I'd regret. Some silences aren't cold. They're earned. By mid-morning, we crossed paths again near the glass hallway that overlooked the lower courtyard. She was leaning on the railing, staring at the koi pond like it might offer an escape plan. I didn't remember saying those things about you, she said as I passed. I stopped. That doesn't mean you didn't say them, I replied calmly. Delara turned toward me, a little too quickly. Are we okay? We're not enemies, I said, but don't confuse this with closeness. She flinched at that. Not visibly, but something in her chest dropped. She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, then closed it again. I kept walking. That evening was the gala. It had been planned months ago, an anniversary celebration for the hotel's renovation. A few hundred people filled the ballroom, staff in sharp uniforms, lighting just dim enough to make everything feel elegant but not theatrical. I stood behind the curtain for a moment before they called me up. Lacey handed me the notes I wouldn't read. You ready? She asked. I nodded. As I walked onto the stage, I heard someone whisper, That's her. I didn't look to see who it was. I reached the podium and let the crowd quiet themselves. Some people think dignity is about keeping quiet, I began. Others think it's about being seen. I think it's about knowing when to speak and when not to. That wasn't on the cards. But it was what I meant. I want to thank the people who show up on time, stay late, and never ask for applause. You're the reason this place breathes. I never said Delara's name. I never needed to. People knew. They always do, eventually. After the applause, I walked off the stage and took the side route toward the staff wing. The back hallway always felt more honest. I stopped by the locker room on my way out. Delara had been given a temporary locker to store her things. It sat on the bottom row, near the old vending machine that only took quarters. I pulled a small envelope from my coat pocket. Inside was a card with the name of someone I trusted, an image consultant who worked quietly with women rebuilding their public lives after scandal. No strings, no notes, just one line I'd written across the flap. Do something new, with less damage this time. I slipped it into the locker, closed the door, and left. Outside, the wind had picked up. The air smelled like rain before it begins. I walked toward the front garden, the kind guests rarely noticed. By the time I reached the sidewalk, the drizzle had turned steady. I didn't pull my coat over my head, I didn't rush. I let the rain touch me, slow, soft, real, just enough to remember I was still alive. The rain let up sometime during the night. By sunrise, only thin beads of water clung to the edges of the rooftop garden chairs, catching the first bits of light like scattered glass. I brought my tea with me, the cup wrapped in both hands, more for comfort than warmth. I set it on the stone table beside the chair no one sat in anymore. It had been my mother's favorite spot. She never said it out loud, but I knew. She always took this chair when she came to visit. Legs crossed, eyes forward, coffee black. Never asked for company, never offered advice. But she listened. Some mornings, I still imagine her here. Not a ghost, just a presence. Not watching me, just witnessing. The city below moved on, same as ever. Cars slid past traffic lights like clockwork. Vendors set up under half-unfolded awnings. Someone down the block was already arguing about a parking meter. But up here, it was quiet. Peace doesn't make noise. It just waits until you're ready to recognize it. I stayed until the wind picked up, then carried my cup down the service stairwell and slipped into the hallway behind the admin wing. It was just past 8 a.m., the hour when people stopped yawning and started pretending they weren't tired. In the lobby, I paused behind a column, just for a moment. Delara stood behind the front desk. No heels, just flats. Her blazer was simple, hair pulled back, no lipstick, no assistant. She handed a guest their keycard, offered a small smile, and turned to adjust something on the screen. She didn't see me. I didn't let her. I didn't need her to. Some might have called it punishment. That she'd been given a basic desk job, that the world she built on aesthetics and applause had crumbled down into something unphotographed. But I didn't see shame in it. I saw something closer to reality. And maybe that was more generous than any apology she could have offered. Back in my office, I opened the last drawer on the right and took out a thank you card for a vendor I'd worked with since before the rebranding. Handwritten, as always. Underneath the card, I slipped in a folded sheet. Just a few words. Not for them. For me. Blood doesn't always mean family, but dignity means knowing when to leave a room and when to build one of your own. I sealed it, labeled it, moved on. Later that afternoon, I passed Thatcher in the hallway near guest services. We didn't stop, we didn't slow. But he noticed me. "Glad to see you smile," he said, quiet, not fishing. "I'm still learning how," I replied. That was the end of it. No open wounds, no rehashing. He kept walking. So did I. That evening, as I did final rounds before leaving for the night, I paused once more at the garden gate. A breeze moved through the trees, cool and light. Inside, things still needed attention. A leaking faucet on the third floor. An overbooked vendor for the weekend's brunch series. A staff member who wanted reduced hours. The world kept spinning, unbothered. But I knew something now I didn't before. I hadn't been erased. I had simply outgrown the frame they tried to fit me in, and I didn't need their spotlight to see myself clearly anymore. The last door I closed that night wasn't the one to my office. It was the one to needing their approval ever again.